DK versus our next riser here. Another rookie revelation. Justin Jefferson, DK or JJ?
I have Justin Jefferson at 9 right now and DK at 4. So that feels like a big discrepancy. But like you said, like those guys in that 6 to 12 area are semi-interchangeable, essentially, just with what we could see out of them. But yeah, I think the reason why I have that discrepancy is that Justin Jefferson wasn't getting a whole lot of red zone work. And so I think there's a little bit of cap there where he could be a big yardage guy, but we need to see him. Well, I would like to see him carve a little bit more in the red zone. Like Adam Thielen put up 13 touchdowns in the red zone this year, which is that's the same as Devontae Adams for context. And then if you look at the other red zone targets, Justin Jefferson got 9 and Irv Smith got 10 red zone targets, which is a quarter of Irv Smith's entire targets on the season. So like,
and the end zone
they have some other people.
Worse. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. So they have some guys that they want to use in there. Like I don't think Justin Jefferson can't do it. But I do think if somebody like Irv Smith starts to emerge, somebody's got to take a little bit of a hit in this offense, because a 2-man funnel is great for Thielen and Jefferson. A 3-person offense is going to take some volume away from somebody unless they decide they want to pass the ball some more.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's an interesting conversation because the two finished, like 2020 was a pretty comparable year from a fantasy perspective for Justin Jefferson and DK. I like that you mentioned the top 24 finishes. Jefferson had one more top 12 finish this season for fantasy. DK had one more top 24 finish than Jefferson. So Jefferson actually finished outside the top 24 even more than DK. Also, DK had more receiving yards, more air yards. I think this one just comes down to the low volume in the passing game for Minnesota, right?
Exactly.
Like Jefferson's 25% market share is a higher chunk of his team's passing pie than DK Metcalf, just to shed light on how low that volume is.
Jefferson and Thielen soaked up 50% of the team's targets together. 2 guys took over half the team's targets. Like that's just insane.
That's what we call a dynamic duo.
Exactly. I have one other interesting note on Justin Jefferson, just with some of the stuff I was looking up, Ty, if you don't mind. There was a lot of talk about him being mainly a slot guy, and we weren't quite sure whether he would be able to excel on the outside. Well, if we take a look at it, 3/4 of his snaps were out wide, and 70%, almost 70% of his fantasy points were from playing out wide. So he definitely bucked that narrative. But yeah,
he's doing a lot of this against cover corners too. Like teams are prioritizing Jefferson over Thielen.
And he's like contested catches, he's looking really good. Short stuff, he's looking good. Intermediate stuff, he's looking really good. Like
he's been historically good.
Like I don't have very many shares of him. Like I don't know if I have any necessarily, but I think like I don't think either of us, Ty, were necessarily low on him coming into the season. Like I think we probably had him in the 4 or 5 range.
I would accept like if I got labeled as a what's the opposite of a truther or whatever, I'd accept it because I was the guy saying a lot of the numbers. Like I didn't say that he couldn't do it. I'm saying we have to call into question a guy who has seen cover corner press man coverage so little, a guy who was the number 2 wide receiver on his team at LSU and was kicked inside because of what's his face. So I just thought
Jamar Chase,
there was questions to be asked, especially
for sure.
Whether he could do exactly what he's doing now, and that's be this kind of alpha guy who can be a wide receiver 1 for a team. And I also think situation's pretty good. Like just to put out how historic he's been, last week he passed Mike Evans. He now ranks 7th on the leaderboard for fantasy points by a rookie wide receiver ever. Nice. He won't pass Randy Moss or Odell, but he could beat out 2016 Michael Thomas, squeeze into that top 5 all time. And I just think it's the volume sucks, right? The passing volume isn't going to be great here, but he is benefiting from a lot of these schemes, the play action, the flood concepts for the Vikings. Like, I do like the situation he's in. So did you say, like, is he so special that you have him as a wide receiver 1 already? You said he's your wide receiver 9?
I got him at 9 right now, yeah.
Yeah, so you're a little higher than I am. Do you have him ahead of CeeDee Lamb? Is he your top-ranked 2020 rookie wide receiver?
No, CeeDee's at 8 right ahead of him.
Jeez.
So, like, they're right in that tier there.
As well, yeah. And we mentioned we're not haters. I'm still gonna maybe get labeled as a hater. I got him as wide receiver 14, so I'm a little bit lower.
I think like the Jefferson truthers would definitely call you a hater because there's people who pound the fucking table for Justin Jefferson.
I would understand that. Like
I think like I don't know. I think the process for being a little hesitant on the the top 5 ranking. I think that's kind of right though, because of the offense and because like as long as Thielen is there, like I don't necessarily see him getting 140 targets. I think he has 109 right now, like 120. Yeah, but I don't see him necessarily eclipsing that elusive 150. Right. So I think like that's kind of where I'm at with that. And that's why I don't necessarily have him that high. And I think that process is somewhat sound.
Well, I think he's going to have to do what A.J. Brown did this year, right? Like compensate with having a big spike touchdown season or something. Because it's hard to argue with the eye-popping efficiency, but it's also easy to argue against some of it not repeating, right? Like he barely cracks the top 20 among all wide receivers in targets and catches, Justin Jefferson, but he's top 10 in receiving yards, air yards, and he's 10th in yards after the catch. Only 3 wide receivers ranked top 10 in air yards and yards after the catch: Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, and Justin Jefferson. So good company, but are we ready to call him an ultra elite wide receiver? Because that's stuff, and like would you be willing to bet on this repeating next year, or are you going to play it safe in a startup and go with a Mike Evans or an Allen Robinson?
Like I think I go Justin Jefferson over Evans. Allen Robinson depends on some things shaken out, but I could see myself going Justin Jefferson over him as well. Like it sounded like I was dogging on him a little bit there, but I wasn't at all. Like I think he's just fantastic. I just think that there's more high-powered offenses that could play into more volume. Like if you look, he's got almost 1,300 yards. You said he's like top 5 in yards on 79 receptions. Like that is fantastic and a feather in his cap. But like you said, like can he really repeat that alongside that spike touchdown season that we want from him? So
and I'm not ready
to put him there.
Yeah, and we just did it with Tyler Lockett a couple of years ago. Like yards per target, you just can't put up yards per target numbers like he's put up this season in back-to-back years. It's just never happened. So it's really hard to sell, me on, because this goes back to what we were talking about philosophically about how we attack drafts and everything, the way we draft, the way drafts have gone in recent years. Like you start running back in round 1 more often than not. Justin Jefferson is somebody you're going to end up having to draft as your wide receiver 1 on a roster. So I don't know if that just kind of scares me, even
That's
if we know.
Hard to do.
Yeah, and I'm like fully admitting that he is the wide receiver 1 on his team over Adam Thielen. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I worry about him being my wide receiver 1 on a roster.